Hi, this is Pastor Josh, and I just want to thank you for watching or listening to these teachings. Our hope is that through these teachings that you would learn more about God and grow closer to Him in relationship. But we also hope that these would be an additional teaching to what you already receive in your church home. If you don't have a church home, we would love to have you here at Cornerstone. So we do pray that through these teachings that you would hear God through the proclamation of His Word.
The rock, his work is perfect, for all his ways are justice. A God of faithfulness and without iniquity, just and upright is he. May God bless the reading of his word. You be seated. These are the words of Moses. Actually, before I get in there, I apologize for my voice. I'm going to be clearing it here and there, so I just say, excuse me now. These are the words of Moses. If you've seen the videos, you young children, of when he's splitting the sea and walking through the sea and leaving Egypt, and God is taking him to a new land, but Moses fails and he sins, and God says, you will not be able to enter into the new land. You'll be able to see the new land, but you won't be able to enter into it. This is Moses' a farewell speech, so to say. Israel, I'm out of here. God's taken me. I don't get to go in the promised land because of this. But Joshua generation, that is the next leader in that young generation, you're about to enter in, and these are my words. Let me proclaim them to you. This is a song. Let me sing it to you. And he says in verse 4, the rock, his work is perfect. All his ways are justice, a God of faithfulness. That's where we focused on last time. A God of faithfulness, a God who does not change, a God who keeps his promises, a God who you can trust in. A God, we have friends and family and countries and worlds that do not keep their promises, right? Always changing their mind, changing the terms, changing everything. Oh, I didn't say that. But God doesn't. He is faithful. So what he says remains true, and he'll continue to be who he is forever. And that is a good thing. That is a rock, in a sense. The rock doesn't change, that you can trust in. But today we want to look at these other words. In the middle of verse 4, it says, for all his ways are justice. All his ways are justice. At the very end of verse 4, he says, just and upright is he. The truth that we have before us this morning is we serve a God who is just. Now, you may not serve a God, you may not believe in God, but I'm just going to tell you the truth, that God is real and that he is just. That's what he tells us this morning. We have a just God. Now, we've spoken about this just a little bit, but this deserves one full Sunday at least. There's so many things that we should get into with the justice of God, but we don't have the time. We just don't have the time. So we're going to try to just give a general understanding of the justice of God, and I hope that you'll stick with me till the end to see what does it mean that God is just. You may think you know the answer, and you probably do, but there might be something in here that you may not yet understand. The justice of God. Now, we say justice today, and people don't think of God. Justice today is what is culturally relevant, yeah? The cancel culture kind of stuff. The social justice movement. Out there right now we have a lot of protests and riots over, really what it comes down to is the skin color of a certain people and the position of authority of another people. And there's some debates and arguments on all these things. But essentially, what are these protests coming down to? They're saying something is not just. We want justice, and it's not happening. That's why there's these protests. And here's what's remarkable, is it's not just in America, not specifically that one, but there is a call for justice worldwide. In China, especially this last year, there was a bunch of protests happening against the government for a lot of sort of reasons. But why were they rising up? Why were they protesting? Because something was not just. In Latin America, South America, all these things were happening. Protests were happening and riots were happening. Why? Because people were proclaiming something is not just. Our world is shouting out with everything that they have, there's no justice here in a specific area. This is not just. So it's a hot topic today. And what are they saying when they say, this is not just? There is no justice. They're saying this. This is not correct. This is not right. This is not the way this should work out. In general, just as individuals, we look at things and we say, that's not right. This is right. And if what happens isn't right, we say, that's not just. There's no justice here. And you can get upset at that. You can do it as an organization, as a group. A couple of just simple examples. Some of y'all students who go to school, you're taking a test, okay? Taking your test. You know, you studied, you did all your work, you know the answers, you're just flying through that. Yeah, A, B, C. I don't know that one. C's the best choice because that's just a good guess, right? So you're going through your test as a student, but your classmate over here didn't study for the test. So what do? I'm going to sit by the smartest person in the room, which may be you, and they're going to lean over, A, C, D, and copy off of your test. Now watch this. The teacher receives it, and they notice something. Hey, there's similarity here. Why are the answers the exact same? What are they? And they look at it and they say, wow, these people cheated. And you who studied for the test gets an F, just like the person who cheated on the test gets an F. And you cry out, this is not just. That's not right. I studied hard. They cheated off of me. This is not right. Simple example, right? For all of us adults in the room who work and have employment, we see a lack of justice with a lot of things, but just another simple example for us is you're working at your job, you do it right, you come in, you punch in right, you punch out right, you're always doing things correctly or as best as you can, you work really hard, and a lot of people around you work really hard, but there's one or two that don't. They get someone else to clock in for them and to clock out for them, and they're always cutting corners and doing these things. Then the boss comes in one day and calls that person, that individual who doesn't do things right, who cheats and cuts corners, calls him into the office, and he comes out and says, hey, everybody, I got a raise. And you say, this is not right. I've been working my tail off. This is not just. How could he do that? What did I do? I've done only the right things. As we see again in our culture, this great call for justice. Another example when it comes bigger, pharmaceutical companies who produce drugs, and that's a hot topic today, right? Because of the shot. But besides that, this has been going on for years. If a pharmaceutical company produces a medicine and it does create harm for that person or individual, most of the time that individual doesn't have enough money to hire the right lawyers to sue the pharmaceutical company for the injuries that they received. And actually in America, they're actually protected from that, but which can be a good thing in a sense. But the pharmaceutical company has all this money. They have the greatest lawyers, so they just come and crush that individual. Even though they were wrong, they crush the individual because they have all the money and all the power, and that individual can't do nothing, and there's no sentence ever done to the pharmaceutical company, and they just go on making money and doing things the way they do. And the individual who lost, or the family who lost a loved one because of that drug, they cry out from the depths of their hearts and the brokenness of their hearts and the agony of their hearts, and maybe even at the funeral grounds, the cemetery where their child or brother or spouse or grandma or mom or whoever died because of this, they cry out and they say, this is not just. This is not right that they could do that. We live in an unjust world. And we know it. That's why we cry out, this is not right. You have your own experiences in life where you say, this is not right. This is not just. And you know it. It's coming out of you. It's bringing these things up. I don't like this. You want justice is what you want. And we're referring to a God who God himself proclaims, I am just. In verse 4, all his ways are justice. We serve a God who only does what is right. See, justice really comes from this, his righteousness. God never does anything wrong. God never does anything bad. God never does anything evil. Those three things kind of come together anyways. But he never does those things. He only does what is right. Now, when he makes a decision on something that he has said, I've said this, and you did this, and here's my response, we call that a judgment. It can be a right judgment, it can be a wrong judgment, but we call it a judgment. Now, God who is righteous can then only do what? What is right. So he will only produce right judgment, which is justice, is what we're wanting, because that's what the cry of our hearts. This is not right. Well, you have a good word this morning, everybody. God only and always does what is right. Now just take a breath and embrace that. What good news we have that God will do what is right, that he is just, because he's righteous. But we have people who will argue that. God is not just. I experienced this in my life. Give an example. Or I've seen this in history. If you look through history and these things happened, how can you say God is just when this happened and those things happened? And really, that argument really should be brought more to the goodness of God. How can God be good with all those sorts of things? But when it comes to the justice of God, how can you say God is just when these things have happened? Well, here's the thing, everyone. There's a time frame of when justice is applied. Now, God also has patience, and God willing, we'll look at that next week. But in his patience, he may not be fully bringing down that judgment yet because he's being patient. But you have to understand this, that he is just, which means that he will eventually, through time, come down with the gavel and say, okay, here's the verdict. But you may not be seeing it yet. We love to say, oh, with God is 1,000, one day is like, or 1,000 years is like one day for God. We like to say that, right? Like, oh yeah, God. But when it comes to justice, we don't like to say it. Like, God, hurry up. Come on, get this thing going. It's his patience. That's just one simple answer to why you don't see it. We won't jump into it all. But the problem isn't even that. Here's the problem. The problem is we want to see the justice happen right now in our time frame because we mistakenly think that we'll feel better. You hear me? We think that if the teacher finally fails that person and not me, or if I get this versus that bad employer, a pharmaceutical company gets this and that I will feel better. That's why we want it. Not because of the justice, because we think we will feel better. It may make you feel better for a moment, but not ultimately. Because your hope is in something that is fleeting back and forth, back and forth. Isaiah 10 reveals to us in the Old Testament of these judges that did not judge correctly. In other words, they were corrupt judges. Poor person would come and they'd give it to the rich person. New Testament, we get the same thing. Jesus calling out and he's saying, no, this is not right. Quit being corrupt judges. And we see that today, right? Corrupt judges. God is not a corrupt judge. That is good news for us. He is not a corrupt judge because he is righteous, right? Listen to this verse, Deuteronomy 10, verse 17. For God, his judgments are never wrong. He cannot be bribed, for the Lord your God is God of gods and Lord of lords, the great, the mighty, and the awesome God, who is not partial and takes no bribe. Deuteronomy 10:17, once again for you. Isn't that good? He takes no bribe. See, we have judges today who make decisions about things. And in order to make a decision, they have to understand what is the law. But that is not enough to be a just judge. We could have a human judge that knows the entire law, the smartest person, woman, or man that we know of, and they just have the knowledge of the law right here. But that doesn't make them just. What makes them just is if their verdict matches up with the law. And unfortunately, y'all, we face a world, and you will continue to face this world where you will face corrupt judges. Do you hear me? That means sometimes what you know is right will not happen. Not right now. Because we have corrupt judges who can be, guess what? Bribed. Deuteronomy was written a long, long time ago, everybody. Thousands of years ago. And they were facing bribery back then. They were facing bad judges back then. They were facing bad verdicts back then. Individuals and family were faced with this reality of, I'll never get what is just. I'll never get what is right. And it's in the scriptures for us today to say, man, we're still facing corrupt judges who do not do what is right and don't make all the right decisions. Not all of them, but we still face that. There's people put into prisons who never did anything wrong. And they're living their life in prison for not doing one thing wrong, but because a judge made a bad decision. Listen to that. You don't put your hope in the justice that is given here. It's good for us to seek that justice. As God's people, we want to see justice in our world. And whatever capacity that fits, we need to be calling for justice. We desire that. Because that's God's kingdom. But at the end of the day, we also have to know we live in a corrupt world. This is not heaven. This is not the kingdom of God fully brought into His presence yet. He will one day, but not yet. So we're going to have to live with that tension. Bribery. Our God cannot be bribed. And let me explain to you why this is a good thing. Imagine me, or somebody else, not me. Imagine someone close to your family. I've given you this example before. Somebody comes in and sexually abuses that person that you love so dear. You say, okay. They arrest him. Goes to the judge. Judge is going to come down with a verdict, with the sentence. He knows the law. He knows it. Okay? Well, sexually abused it. Here's all the evidence. It's very clear. This person's got to go to prison. This is somebody that sexually abused your family member. This is what they deserve. But behind the doors, this sexual abuser comes to the judge and says, hey, judge, look, you know I'm a millionaire. Got tons and tons and tons of money. I get whatever you need. What do you need? In fact, I'll give you $1 million right now. Just drop this sentence. Judge goes, I've been in some financial strain recently. I bought some things I shouldn't have bought. $1 million sounds good right now. Got yourself a deal. Takes the money, comes to his seat. I find you not guilty of sexual abuse. You as a family member, what? Cry out, this is not right. This is not just. Because a judge was bribed. So God puts it in His Word, Deuteronomy 10:17, that He cannot be bribed. so that you know that justice will come to all the wrong that's happened to you. Did you know that? The things that you face as an individual, as a family, that you say, this is not right that this happened, God knows about it. Remember, He's omnipresent, and He knows it all. God knows about it, and we serve a just God, meaning He's going to come down with a gavel and say, that is not right. That is not according to my word. This is not the way I wanted life. And there's consequences for that. I am not a judge who that person can come and say to me, hey, God, I know I messed up with this situation. You know, I got a lot of money. Let me give you like $1 million. I'll donate it to the church or to this organization. And, just let me off the hook here. That's not the God we serve, everyone. And that's good news. Because justice will eventually come for every single one of us in that aspect. What good news that is. But it's also bad news for us. Every one of us, we call out for justice. Our world calls out for justice. But deep down, we don't want justice. You hear me? When we look at what others have done to us, or what others have done to someone else, and we say, that's not right, we call out, justice, justice, justice. We need justice. And we take hope in the fact that He doesn't take a bribe, and we say, yes, God is going to bring justice to this individual. And then you turn and look in the mirror and you see yourself, and you look at the Word of God and you say, wow, I've messed up against God. God, don't be just with me. Please forgive me. We can't have it both ways. We can't say, you be just to them, but forgive me. That's wrong. We have to be honest with God. If we cry out justice, and that's my plea to the world right now, world, you are calling out for justice, but you have no clue what you are calling out for. You are calling for God to come down and be just with you. And Romans 3 says that we have all sinned, right? And Romans continues to say that the wages, the payment, the consequence of that sin is death, both physical death and an eternal separation from God. And if you know who God is love, God has peace, God is joy, all these sorts of things. You take away love, you take away peace, you take away joy, you take away happiness, and that's what you have when you're away from God. Wickedness. So, the justice of God. We call it out, but do we really want it? Not really, because we want forgiveness. But we've already established the truth that what? God is just and He takes no bribe, so there's nothing you can do. You can't just say, God, hey, no, I messed up, sorry. Like, I'll give you $1 million. Not that any of us have it, right? If you do, somebody wants to be your friend in here. You can't bribe them with money. You can't bribe them with authority. Hey, God, if you help me out, I'll make you president of the United States. I'm God. I'm in control of all things. I'm the ultimate authority. Who you think you can bribe me? You can't bribe God. You can't blackmail God. Hey, God, I got this dirt on you. Now, if you don't do this, God is just. And yes, we're like celebrating the fact, God, you're just for all these situations, and ultimately, all these wrongs that have been done, you're going to provide the verdict, the sentence, that these were wrong. And I'm excited for that, but I'm not excited when I think of myself and my sin. And now I realize there's nothing I can do to be set free from this sin in and of myself. And you are a just God, which means your judgment is coming down upon me. Uh-oh. This is the justice of God, y'all. God is right. righteous. He only does what is right. When he says something, when he puts his word out there, what is right is for him not to go back on his word. And when he's proclaimed to us, if you choose to live your own life, death is coming. And you're already facing a death. That is my justice. And it's right for me to do so. If not, I become a liar. I can become bribed. And there is no justice in the world. Not for you and not for anybody else. So your killers can get away. Your abusers can get away. All these people who've done wrong can get away. And I know you don't want that because you're calling out for justice, but you have to understand when you call out for justice that I am just towards you also. Now, watch this, y'all. Listen here, because this creates a problem for us. Because we look at Moses, who we read here, and he's about to leave. He'll be with God. Wait a minute. Did you hear me? He's about to leave and go be with God. That's not right. If God is just, Moses has sinned, which is why he's giving this song in the first place. I'm not going to get into the promised land because I sinned. And if God is just, then how can Moses then go to be with God? That's a problem. And that shouts out that God is not just. How does David get to go be with God? Someone who was a liar? Someone who was a rapist? Someone who was a murderer? Yeah, I like to talk about the slingshot, right? But that he's a murderer. How does David get to go be with God? How does Sarah get to go be with God? How does Mary get to go be with God? They've all sinned. And God is just. And God says, you will die and you'll be separated from me forever. But we see in the scriptures that they're not. They get to go be with God. Listen here. If you fall asleep, wake up and listen here. The justice of God is why they get to go be with Him. Listen here. John 3:16, right? God so loved the world. Let's just stop there. God is righteous. He only does what is right. And He makes decisions off of what the true instruction, the truth is. Now, we always come to His Word, but God is the Word, right? So God in Himself is love, and He has to make a judgment. Listen here, He has to make a judgment that is right, meaning it has to line up with His love. And in order to line up with His love and a love for the world, it means this, that He has to find a way to provide redemption for those that are going to die. It is His justice that requires and provides redemption. And you're going to have to take that home with you and chew on it, okay? God is always righteous, right? He said, if you sin, you will die. For Him to be right, He has to follow through or He'll be a liar. That is why death comes to us. That is why it is a bad place for us to see the justice of God there. But God is also loving. And for Him to make the right decision out of His love, He has to provide redemption for us, which is why He sends Jesus. Jesus is His judgment of love. Jesus comes to live the perfect life for us, never sinning, never failing, so that we would be seen as perfect. And Jesus pays the price of our sin, death, because God, as a just God, must punish what he said or he'll become a liar, but he also must require redemption because he is a lover. And you see the justice of God on the cross. You see God being faithful and righteous through the cross. Because if he doesn't send redemption, he's not just. And if he doesn't require death, he is not just. But we serve a God that Deuteronomy 32 says that we have a just God. And this is why you see Moses and David and Sarah and all these other people getting to be with God even though they have sinned because of their faith and trust in God. Because God was patient with them and he says, just wait. I know it looks like I'm unjust right now, but Jesus is coming. And when he comes, you'll finally understand why you could be forgiven. The world will understand why Moses was forgiven and he could go to heaven, and why Mary was forgiven and she could go into heaven. And for us, we get to hear this news and we look back and we say, wow, this is what you were doing. You are just and you are worthy to be magnified and glorified. And we honor you and we say, thank you, God, for being just as far as taking away our sin, but also for providing redemption for us. The Word of God calls us to worship. As you embrace this truth of God being just, that's what should happen to you. You should be set free from your bonds of sin to say, oh, I'm set free. I no longer have sin because Jesus paid it all. And lift it up to say, because He loved me through it. His love required it. His love came and ran after me. So I will forever proclaim God is just, and I am so thankful for it. And my hope is in that. And when I don't see justice around me, I'm required to seek that justice. But even if it fails at the end of the day, I know my God is just. And I know I'm in a right place with Him because of Christ. But if you don't have Christ, then all you have is the death sentence that's coming to you. It is a pleasure to serve a just God. This is the word of the Lord. And it is our responsibility to respond in worship. To respond in any other way is sin. May the Lord speak to you. To those who have ears, let them hear.